If you guys are interested in Oculus Quest 2, Zenith VR MMO, or A Township Tale VR content and updates, then go ahead and like the video, hit the notification bell, and subscribe to this channel so that you don't miss out on any future videos. Hey guys, welcome back to Quest World. Today we'll be covering A Township Tale again for you, and on request we're covering 10 jobs in A Township Tale. And these are all 10 jobs that are listed on the wiki as official jobs, but we're going to get into whether they are official jobs and whether they have skill trees and what you're supposed to do for each job. So without any further ado, let's log into the video. So before we begin, I'm going to cover which jobs have shrines and are capable of being upgraded really quickly before we get into all 10 of the jobs. And the shrines that exist are the Blacksmithing Shrine, the Mining Shrine, the Archery Shrine, the Woodcutter Shrine, and Warrior Shrine. So if you wanted to be a merchant or another job class that is like that, you probably do not have a shrine to use. Therefore, you will not have much in the way of upgrading skills for that particular character. So this is really just to help you find a viable character to play in the game. Number 1, a blacksmith. So as the blacksmith, it's your job to basically learn how to smelt and forge. And to do this, you simply take any metal that you choose or ore over to the smithing rig, which is inside of the blacksmith shop. If you don't have access to that, go ahead and burn down the vines that are in the doorway. And then on the left side of the machine, you'll see a very large bowl-like fixture attached to the smelting machine. You throw ores and ingots into there, and it will basically produce any kind of mold that you slate in next to that slot. So there are large metal-looking tablets with pictures on them. They have a bar on them that represents an ingot, and then you multiply that by the number that is next to that, and I'll tell you how many ingots you need to put in that big old bowl to be able to make whatever you're trying to make. It'll also tell you if you're making multiple parts in that particular craft. If you're making like the little spikes, it'll tell you you're making 5 spikes out of what you're using. Next, we'll be discussing how you fuel it. So basically, this was a little confusing at first, but you just need to throw coal in there. Go find a lot of coal, which looks like flint, but it's a little bit more round, and you throw it in that machine right in front where there's a grate on the front. There's a little door, you open it, you throw coal inside. And what this does is it fuels it, and then on the right side of the machine, it will produce whatever that you're building. So you'll go out around that side, and you'll see that there is a catch on that side, and that is where you'll find anything and everything you're building. If the item is too small, it'll come out in the little bubbles next to the machine. After you have produced an item, if it is thick, then you'll notice that it needs to be forged out. You can take it in front of the blacksmith shop, lay it in the fire, wait until you see embers arise off of the steel. Make sure you have a decent blacksmithing hammer. For this, you need to note that you need to take the hot metal with embers on it over to the anvil. And basically, the speed of how fast you're able to forge something depends on the toughness of the metal and the temperature in the weapon hand. It doesn't really matter if it's a ginormous hammer or anything like that, but a really durable metal hammer is going to do the trick. However, I do like to say I prefer to use a longer hammer so that I can hammer out the tip of the weapon or tool that I'm making. The progress of forging can be observed through the shape of the weapon head, which is the end of it. So it can be observed by, you can see it flattening and expanding throughout the entirety of the blade. You have to basically strike every spot on the sword, up and down the blade. There are sections inside of what you're forging up the length of it that you have to strike. If you miss one, then you'll have to go back and make sure that you hit it. Whenever you see white circles appear on impact as opposed to sparks, you'll know that you're done with that particular section. Whenever it's finished, you'll notice it's flattened out. It has its solid color of whatever the metal you chose, and now you can attach it to a handle on something else. So basically, you take a handguard and slap it on a handle, and then you're able to attach your blade to it, stuff like that. If you level up in any of these, by the way, you basically will see like a ring appear around you, and that will indicate that you've leveled up. I mean, that should be pretty obvious once you see it, but just in case, right? Number 2, the Carpenter. So, as a carpenter, it's your job to learn how to use the carpentry deck, which is the large machine that looks like a wooden table with steel attachments and bindings onto it, in the carpentry shop, which is the main shop you see in town. As soon as you leave the respawn point and you go into town, it's the shop on the right of the pond. All you really need to be a good carpenter is a solid hammer and a decent chisel. However, with the carpentry, the hammer is a little different. But before we get into that, let's talk about what you have to do to start carpentry, okay? First, go over to the book in the corner and tear out a page and add it to the metal frame that fits the page on the workbench. Now, you'll notice if you're not able to add this page to the frame, it's because you're not picking out a recipe, you're picking out an instruction page. So add the recipe page, tear out a different page with a recipe for an item on it onto that bench, and then you can add X amount of logs to the bench. On that page, you'll see 3 sections of logs. Those each indicate 6 logs apiece because 3 on bottom, 3 on top for each section of those logs. Once you add them to it, you will need a chisel and hammer, as mentioned before. And it's not based on the metal in the hammer, but the weight of the hammer. So a really large hammer, handheld hammer, is probably good for this one. Big old swings on it. This has worked for me, but when I say big swings, I mean big, gentle swings. So I kind of start back over my head and make sure I tap the back of the chisel. And you'll notice that there are blue highlights on the logs you're supposed to be chiseling out. You will have to chisel out 6 logs for each section. Once you do this, you'll notice you have a clean hunk of wood. Then you'll have to chisel out 6 more logs for each section that will not break on you, and then after that you'll finally have whatever you're building. But it is important to note that if you do not see the blue highlights, you have failed your build. You need to grab the knob on the workbench, push it towards the end of the workbench, and it will eject everything that you've started on that. Usually this means you broke 1 log in the entire build, so the remaining logs are all fine and you can re-add them, but you lost 1 small log. Number 3, the cook. It's pretty simple for sounding for the job of the cook, but they actually have a lot of things that they have to take care of. So basically, as the cook, gather the food, cook the food, gather the materials for cooking food, basically learning how to make stews, learning how to make an efficient way of cooking a lot of food at one time, because every character in the game has a nutrition bar and needs to eat. So, to explain this one a little better, basically, as the cook, you will need to gather grass, logs, sticks, and meat. These are the very first, most basic ingredients to start cooking. Now, this is assuming you already know how to make a fire, but just in case you don't, you take a stone and a flint and you strike them together, and it will make fire over grass. But there are plenty of fire sources in town if you leave them lit, like your torches and lanterns. So, if you have a functioning town well enough that needs a cook, then you probably have someone gathering these resources and bringing them to the cook, hopefully to make their job a little easier. But what you want to do is set 2 wedged logs over some grass, and basically this will create a tray that will hold a lot of food, and you can cook a ton of food this way. And you will also want to create a pick, or a heat stick, if you will, something that you can poke at the fire with, poke the food out of the fire because it will get destroyed if you leave it in too long. That will keep you from getting burned and damaging your health while you're cooking. Additionally, I would suggest that you carry enough things to basically cook at one time so that you don't waste your time with this, because it can be slightly tedious, and you can find areas that make cooking easier, like turning a huge hunk of the ground into a big bowl and then kind of cooking in that. But my favorite thing to do so far is to find one of the tree stumps, throw some grass on it, throw just 2 logs on top of that, wedged facing each other, and then it creates kind of a dip, and you can put a ton of food between those logs, maybe like 6 pieces to 12 pieces between those logs, depending on how patient you are. You set the fire and grass on fire below it, and it will cook within about a minute or so. And then all you need to do is take your poker and just scoop everything off the top of the log and reset and keep going. And you can kind of just keep doing this to make a lot of the little meat nuggets. Additionally, I would like to add on that if you take the meat nuggets and you put them over a fire, like an actual fire source, like the blacksmithing forge, it will destroy the food. It's way too hot. So the game knows when you're making food over a man-made fire or if you're just shoving it in a torch. The only difference is whenever you stick food inside of your lantern, if you're patient enough and you hold your arm up for long enough, it will cook that food into a nugget that is edible. It's like having a portable little microwave with you. Number 4, the farmer. So the farmer is listed as future content, so what this basically means for us is that we don't have a lot of information on it, but the main tools the farmer will be using are things like the shovel and the pickaxe so that they can dig, but primarily the shovel, and they're going to plant things and grow them like carrots and vegetables so that the cook has more ingredients to add to their recipes, which will basically increase the nutritional value of their food. It's rumored that they'll be able to farm out a new kind of food, like a wheat of some kind. And that sounds interesting, but I want to wait a little longer before I say anything more on this particular class just because there's not a lot of information on it, and there is no shrine for this class. So it's kind of a official, unofficial, but it is listed as it's a canon class to the game. For number 5, the most thankless but important job is the Janitor. So essentially, the janitor doesn't have a skill shrine either, but what they kind of do is they gather everything that's being dropped all over your server and constantly reorganize your server so that it doesn't lag. But this also creates resources for all the other jobs in town, basically gathering bones, feathers, food, branches, stones, flints, all the ore that falls on the ground. If you are using a disassembly machine, I did this recently and just made a huge mess with taking a bunch of stuff apart. The janitor might take those and put them away. Mainly, they also light torches, add fuel to things, and help run errands around the town. Now, these are just the listed jobs of the janitor, but I'm going to be honest, I feel like you can do a little more with the class, and it's honest, for as important as this class is in the game, for the way it runs, it's kind of crazy that they don't get their own skill shrine or special tools and weapons. They do have a bucket and a net. At number 6, we have the merchant, which doesn't have a skill tree either, and it's probably the most boring class, if in my opinion, in the entire game. But basically, they just buy and sell things, they add coins to all the projects that require them. They just run around picking up coins and trading and selling stuff. I don't really understand this class in a personal server. I guess it works in an open server where lots of people are communing who don't know each other, but personally, I only play on servers where I know most of the people. I know everyone on the server can be like trusted and things like that, and due to that, we just share all the resources, so we don't really need a merchant on any of the servers we play. Number 7, the miner. The miner basically just needs a decent pickaxe, and you go in front of the mine or down into the mine, and you will strike the stones, rocks, and all those kind of protruding elements with your pickaxe, and you mine. It's relatively simple, but there are a lot of rewards in the mine. So the miner is also kind of like a treasure hunter in a way because they get to go down into the dungeons and gather all the extra things. To have a good pickaxe, it's kind of like having a good weapon. You just need a solid metal and a decent handle. Use wide, relatively strong swings, and this works pretty well for me. If you guys have any more suggestions about the miner, go ahead and let us know in the comments below. Number 8, the ranger. So the ranger is kind of obvious. They do have a skill shrine. I could say that the ranger is the hunter in this particular game. The ranger could be responsible for shooting the little bird things that run around that you turn into meat. But the ranger is also good support for our party going into the mine because they can carry a lot of light and they can shoot and kind of keep the creatures off everyone's back while they're trying to gather things, and because they're in more or less a safe place because they're an archer, they can stand in high places and shoot down onto creatures. So I mean, you guys know what an archer is, you know what they're good for in majority games, so we're just going to move on. I'd like to add though that their main responsibility as far as the things they need to craft is just your bow and arrows. There are a few other tools that you can carry, but this is up to each individual really how they want to play their ranger. But the cool thing about the ranger is all the special powers they get from the skill shrine that they have, like shooting multiple arrows or charge shotting arrows. Number 9 is the Warrior, and similar to the Ranger, you do have a skill shrine, you do have powers that you can get, but for the most part, your job is to protect the party and build better weapons for yourself, better armor, typical to any RPG warrior class, basically just upgrading your character. It's really easy to be a warrior and something else, so like a blacksmithing warrior, very easy to maintain. In fact, it's almost inevitable. Number 10 is the woodcutter. Woodcutters are mainly in the wooded valley, the cliffs and the forest, because that's where the places that they can chop down trees are. So they kind of come in contact with some creatures, but for the most part, you just need a solid axe, similar to the pickaxe situation. But you're the only one who, with that axe, if we're talking about just the party, if you have one of everything, you're one of the only ones capable of cutting down the trees and then chopping them up into smaller logs. And you can also chop logs into sticks and sticks into arrow shafts. So all of those can be done by the woodcutter. There's a few extra things that you can do, but for the most part, you'll just be supplying the town with wood. And for a bonus, we're going to be talking about the other category. The main idea behind the other is that you simply haven't chosen a class yet, and you're still kind of playing all the classes to see what you want to be in the town. Maybe you have tried carpentry and blacksmithing and they just weren't for you. Maybe they were too complicated to start, so you decided to do something like gathering, woodcutting, and one of the unlisted jobs, or let's say the shrineless jobs. But let's say you have gotten further down in the game and now you want to be a blacksmith. So they're kind of thinking that you were in the other category up to the point you chose to be a blacksmith and decided to start working on that continuously and specifically. In a few days, I have a 10 jobs I'd like to see video coming out, and I'd love for you guys to check that one out because that's going to go in depth on a few of the jobs I think we're missing from the game that kind of are already there, or at least they're set up to be. That was just 10 jobs from A Township Tale for you guys. So if you like this video, let me know in the comments below and maybe we'll keep making more like this. Remember that if you would like to join the conversation on any of the topics we cover on the channel, come on over to the Facebook group, Discord, or Patreon. We really appreciate all the likes, comments, and subscribes, all the support from all viewers. Thank you guys so much for watching, and please keep watching.